this video, we're going to look at the actuals within a job in NIM. To access the job actuals, go to the production menu and click on actuals. From here, the job actuals overview will load, and at the top, we'll see a dashboard that includes our bid totals for cost, profit, and margin, our projected costs, as well as our actual cost, profit, and margin. Our bid total is the sum total of our awarded bids. Our projected cost is calculated on the Projections tab. Our actual cost is derived from our Actualization tab and is calculated based off of time cards and expenses that have been entered into the system as compared to the total of awarded bids. Hovering over the totals in the dashboard, you can actually see a tooltip that indicates how the value is derived. Below our dashboard, we have graphs for actual cost per location, an hours timeline indicating how many hours of regular time, overtime, double time, as well as non-billable time have been spent on the job, as well as the total time entered for individual bid line items. In this example, we can see we have a CG line item here with 560 hours of regular time, 37 hours of overtime, as well as 22 hours of double time. We can move over to the Locations tab and see how the time was distributed across locations, as well as see a total for each of our users. On any of our tabs in the job actuals, we can hide the dashboard by clicking on the arrow to the upper right. That will minimize the dashboard and create more space for the information below. Clicking on the arrow again will reveal the dashboard. Now moving over to our Projections tab, we can see how our projection cost has been calculated. When looking at our bid cost, that is essentially derived from the hard cost on our bids. However, with projections, we look at the individual rates that are assigned to the crew members that are included on the job. Here we can enter the total regular time, overtime, or double time per each of our crew members, and we can do that based on the full term of the job, a weekly basis, or a daily basis. Based on the estimated hours that we include for each user, we can get a projected total cost for the project. Now, as we scroll down, we see that we have labor items as well as expenses. Now, when we're looking at bids, and I'm going to go back to an awarded bid here, you can see we have two different types of items that have been included on this bid. The items with the user icon is considered a labor item, and that item will be actualized against a time card. The item with the credit card icon is an expense item, and that will be actualized against any expenses that are included on the job. So as we go back to our actuals, we can see here we have our crew members, but we also have labor items. So for any labor item that might not have time associated with it from a user, you can enter a fixed dollar value. You can do the same for expenses, individual third-party costs, and if there are any additional items that don't fall within those categories or were not previously bid for, you can include that as an additional projected item. Now, during the course of our job, we can click the Show Actuals checkbox to view our running actuals as compared to our current projections. Here we can see we projected 180 hours of regular time, 20 hours of overtime, and no double time, for a total projected hard cost of $26,500. Based on our actuals and the time cards entered for that user, we can see that there were 182 hours of regular time, 11 hours of overtime, and 12 hours of double time, totaling $28,140, just slightly over our projected costs. Now, once the project is underway and users are entering time cards and expenses against the job, you will see that information accumulate in the Actualization tab. Similar to our projections, the actualization is broken up into multiple sections. The first section is time cards. This is actualizing any time cards that have been entered into the system. When a user enters a time card, the assignment selected for that time card will determine which bid line item those hours are attributed to. Now, you can have multiple tasks linked to an individual bid item. In this case, on my bid, I have a CG line item, and I have 500 hours estimated across all of my bids. Now, I have 950 hours estimated on tasks for this job. And if I click on this row, I can open up and see all of my tasks, as well as their individual estimated hours. This is helpful because in many instances, the hours that we present to the client on our bid are not necessarily the hours we know it's going to take internally to get the project completed. This way, those discrepancies are still maintained and we can work against the estimated hours that it's truly going to take to complete the project. Now, moving over to our actual hours, these are the hours entered by users in time cards. and you can see the distribution for each of the different task types. So in this case, we have 500 bid hours, 950 estimated hours, 619 actual hours entered in time cards, with our breakdown of regular time, overtime, double time hours, as well as our non-billable hours. We can see a difference of 119 from our bid hours to our actual hours. So we did go 119 hours over, but when looking at our amounts billed to our client, we billed $64,900. Our bid estimated hard cost was $60,000. However, our actual hard cost based off of crew rates came in at $44,000. So even though we went over on time, we actually came in under on budget. For any item that wasn't bid for, but there were time cards entered, you'll actually see bid hours of 0, but the estimated time and the actual hours will still be included in your job actuals. Now moving down, we could look at our labor items without submitted time cards. So this is any labor item that did not have a time card submitted for it on the job. In this case, you can enter a fixed hard cost value and then associate it with a location. Coming down to our expenses, we have the option to bill our client back for any overages. In this case, we have equipment rental that was entered in our expenses section here for $10,000. Coming back to our actuals, we billed the client for $2,000 and our bid hard cost was $2,000. So this would have been a pass-through. Based off of our expense, we spent $10,000. So NIM is indicating here that we have a possible reconciliation amount for $8,000. If I can bill this back to the client, maybe I want to add a 10% markup. I'll see my adjusted reconciliation amount here, and I can add this to the total. Now you'll notice when I add this to the total, it is going to update my actual total value. So now that my actual total value is 123, we can scroll back up to the top and see that is actually different than my bid total. My actual total is what carries over to my invoices, so my accounting department sees that there is still money that can be billed back to the client. Now, in addition to just including that as part of the actualization, you do have the option to add another awarded bid as an overage that would include this reconciliation amount. Similar to expenses, we can treat third-party costs the same, and then again, for anything that does not fall within these categories or was not billed for, we can add it as an additional billed item. If you have made any changes to your actualization, click the Save button to save those changes. You can also click the Excel button to export your actualizations to an Excel file. Now moving over to our tasks, we can see the individual totals for each of our different task types. So we have our estimated hours, our actual hours, as well as our breakdown of regular time, overtime, double time, non-billable, the difference between our estimated and actuals, and the actual hard cost for each of our different task types. Now these are the task type totals across the entire job. If I scroll down, I can see a breakdown of costs for each of my individual assets, as well as the tasks assigned to those assets. And same for individual shows. I can see my total for all of my shots. Or I can expand this and see a per shot cost with the per shot estimated hours, actual hours, as well as actual hard cost, or again, the individual cost per each of my different tasks. Now in a second, we'll look at the tasks themselves and see how you can visualize the budget for those tasks when creating them. But lastly, let's look at our crew tab here and look at the information contained. Here's the total hours as well as actual hard cost for each of my different crew members on the project. Clicking on the column menu, I can choose what information to display in this grid. Here I can see my individual rate type for each user, their rate, any P&W amount, and then we have the effective hourly rate versus the average hourly cost. Now the effective hourly rate is essentially our rate. The only way this might be different from your initial rate would be that if the user received a raise over the course of the project. The average hourly cost looks at your overtime and double time hours, removes any rate multipliers, and determines what your per hourly cost is for that individual user. Here you can see there's actually a discrepancy of $10 per hour based on the amount of overtime and double time work that was completed. Moving over, we can see our total hours, our adjusted hours. Now the adjusted hours may be different than your total hours in the case of when a user is using payroll rules as their rate type. There may be a situation where the payroll rules are guaranteeing a minimum number of hours or limiting the total number of hours allocated towards that user. Lastly, we see our user cost, average P&W amount, and then our actual hard cost, which is the total of our user cost plus any P&W. Now, as we look back to these estimated hours on tasks versus the actual hours, this information is included in our tasks themselves. So if I come over to my sequence here, and I look at an individual task, I can see my CG budgeted hours here. So this is my CG line item on the sum total of awarded bids. And on this task, I have 80 hours estimated for this individual task. And you can see that value has been entered here. Now, there are 870 hours that have been estimated on other tasks. And in this case, I am 450 hours over the estimated CG budget. And you can see that here of 950 out of 500. So this way, as you're going through and creating tasks and estimating time for your tasks, you can see how much of your initial budget you are using and if you're below or going over. Now, the actual hours is the hours that have been entered in time cards against your tasks. So in this case, we've estimated 80 hours, and at this point in the task, only 49 have been entered for roughly 61% of our overall estimated hours. And if you hover over the progress bar, you can see that there's 31 estimated hours remaining. So this is a great way to make sure that you're actually staying on track for your tasks, and you may want to adjust your estimates as you get into the project depending upon the workload. Now, the same information can also be visualized from our list view, where we can see our estimated time versus our actual time per task. And again, clicking on that task will bring up that same task information where we can see our total estimated per budget. And that is a quick overview of job actualizations in NIM. For more information, please refer to the NIM documentation, or if you have any questions, please feel free to email us at support@nim-labs.com. Thank you.